I would maybe suggest it's worth removing everything that's not working from the economy, and don't introduce anything like this again until they can solve the greater problems. Because I think between RMT, between massive inflation coming from the UBI of warlords that they've had to keep up so people can deal with the inflation, World of Warcraft is just full Zimbabwe at this point in time. It's going to get that way in terms of inflation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've gone full Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
I assume it's not just a sort of Venezuela, the currencies went crazy situation.
Yeah, so I think they need to be very careful what they do with the economy, because they have a lot bigger problems than this to solve that are like deeper.
True.
That's kind of what I'm saying, where the economy stuff is all fine except for all of these deep-rooted issues.
In that case,
Yep.
bonus segment. Get involved. Okay. Professions, crafting, how do we make them more exciting? A few things came into my head there.
Yep.
One thing that was kind of cool is having some content connected to it, some storylines. So maybe we could do that. That's one thing that would be pretty good to do. Okay, but we want to actually think about how it's actually interesting. Now, one of the nice things in the new patch is, if you're just starting a new alt, bam, you get a full set of 233 crafted gear. Once the crafters hit honored with the new rep and unlock the next rank of the crafter's mark, right? And then you can actually put some pretty cool buffs into that. Like, you can just have a buff on your crafted gear that extends the duration of your, like your pots. Not your pots. Oh, that would be iffy. No, your flasks and elixirs. And a few other things, like even speed. And I thought that was pretty neat. And then I'm just sort of thinking, okay, well, how about... There's all these verticals of the game, right? All these ways to play the game. I was even thinking about FF14 a bit, because in FF14 you have crafting gear. Like, gear with stats that impact your crafting. Because crafting has stats. In the same way you have strength, agility, crit. In FF14 you have stats for crafting depending on the crafting gear you're wearing. So I wonder if there's anything that they could do in and around that. The idea that a blacksmith could craft themselves a blacksmithing set. And you could go two different ways. Either it's a blacksmithing set that makes them better at blacksmithing, or it could just be, this is powerful gear. Maybe it's... because you wouldn't really want it to be better than normal raid content, I suppose. But the idea that, somebody just going in with cash in the auction house can buy a full set of crafted gear. I like the idea of the blacksmith being able to have gear that is better than that they can wear, that requires being a good blacksmith to actually be able to make, right? Just, the idea that you can kind of feel like, I'm a good blacksmith, I'm here wearing my really good blacksmithing gear. Oh, I'm going into the new world zone? Cool, well, I have my big set of blacksmithing gear because I actually invested in this and progressed this and unlocked some things. That's one idea. There's, of course, other systems that could add to the economy. If they were to add player housing into World of Warcraft, then, suddenly tailors making cushions.
Yeah.
Is there a new secondary profession to do construction stuff that uses materials crafted by the other professions? I mean, I remember when I was playing RuneScape many years ago, the new construction skill came in, and I was like, oh, cool, construction. And I started, increasing my wood cutting so they could get the wood to craft the things. Okay, so a player housing thing, actually, that could add to the game if you are a crafting person who wants to make... who wants to make some money crafting. Maybe you don't give a shit about player housing, but that actually could be a new way for you to make some coin. But in a way that wouldn't impact players who are, doing raiding and stuff like that. So, how do we make crafting actually good and interesting again? How do we make the economy interesting?
It's very hard to say. I keep getting hyperfixated on the fact that bots just wreck any gathering that's going on all the time. Yeah, the only thing I'm thinking of is how much I liked the idea of my character, my paladin. Obviously, she's not been a miner in a long time, but whenever she was in Legion, walking around with the fell slate inserts in the arm because of the story, that was always a part of what I thought about my character. And then it completely irrelevant, so now everyone just runs engineering. But that's one of the things we're doing. What you're suggesting is difficult because of the restrictions on having two professions. So you kind of run into problems there of you have to balance them all, which is just...
You do, but okay, you can do that with your blacksmithing set.
Yeah.
But your blacksmithing set's not, and I wouldn't do it in a way where it's going to be majorly competing with raid gear or Mythic Plus gear or anything like that.
Yeah, but, is it slightly better than any other gear you can get up to that point? Will that mean the metagaming nightmare is everyone goes blacksmith to get this and then abandons it once it's no longer relevant? Is that kind of the problem?
To what degree, though, do we just design around metagaming to the point where there's no fucking video game left? Like, at what point do we actually just say, no, we have to draw a line in the sand and design a fucking video game instead of always just second-guessing every single possible decision that could result in a fun, fantastical player experience that makes them feel like they're playing an RPG? Like, at what point do we just say, yeah, fuck it, if you want to metagame it, do it, whatever. There's a whole bunch of other people who won't do that, and they're actually going to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
okay, you want to do that in a way where you're limiting the harms of the metagaming? But like that example of the blacksmithing gear, like, yeah, that's why you wouldn't make it competitive with Heroic Raid. I don't know. And it's like there's so many points in the game's past where, Armorsmith, Weaponsmith, remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's before the game became so narrow.
Yeah, well, how about we unnarrow the game, please?
Widen the road, yeah.
Yeah, is that not what people want? Because I don't think like a bunch of... I'm not like seeing the, the mythic raiding competitive people come in and say, I actually want more hoops to jump through and I want more complexity. No, I think actually they want the thing that they do to just be simple and fun. They can go out and do it. I think, they're happy to raid log, but loads of them would also like enjoy player housing or enjoy whatever the hell, outside of their raid nights.
I think that's kind of the problem where I'm kind of against the wall for thinking about crafting stuff because there's no other content in the game that kind of feels like it matters to do in any capacity because it's all, here's your in-game pillars and then your open world zone, which has not really a whole... Obviously, it's got stuff in it that's interesting, but it's got a very limited amount of stuff that's interesting, and it doesn't really have an awful lot of unique or interesting gameplay to it. But also, there's nothing in the world that people really go to do. So I think the broadening out content overall would then open the pathway to make more interesting things or interesting ways to engage with that content. Because I think if they try to revamp crafting now in a limited enough fashion, but it ends up being within the rules that are currently established, like revamping crafting with the rules of Shadowlands is going to be very different to if you were trying to do crafting with the rules of Wrath going on or something like that. I think that's kind of the problem they're up against, where they need to broaden the content and broaden the scope of what World of Warcraft is by having a lot of activities that don't feed into the same directions, which is to say, instead of it being, well, we're going to widen out the middle of the game and then funnel it back into this end game, they need to go, well, here's a load of just different stuff you can do that somehow feels like it matters in some way. But I think things only matter when they're fun to do for their own sake. And that needs to be very intentionally designed. And I think it'll be a long time before they're willing to go, here's a thing that you do entirely for its own purpose. Why? Because it's fun. Not because it gives you a bonus or because it gives you a reward that fit, like, because it's everything funnels, like even the things that don't funnel into endgame funnel into mounts or pets.
Yeah, of
generally
course.
Speaking.
But I think that just means they need more ways to reward players.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of hard to know exactly what. Like, a lot of people got excited whenever backpacks came in, but then we didn't get a great deal. We didn't get many backpacks, and a bunch of the ones we did get were just like monetized via Recruiter Friend and things like that. Yeah. Of course, it was nice that we have the ones that are there in Shadowlands on that slot. So I wonder, so can we maybe get some craftable backpacks? Are there then other things that we can craft? Like, are there new spell effects that enchanters could make? Not spell effects, or just new effects, whatever, that enchanters could make. Somebody's had different colors of spells. Yeah, a few little things like that. Could be a bit tricky to implement, in fairness. Or even with professions, like, why don't we have it so that each profession, kind of has like its base? It's like blacksmithing. Okay, well, there is a representative of the blacksmiths in wherever the new place that you go, but the blacksmiths, they have their big base in Ironforge. Yeah. And, there's a little story based out of there, and there's some things that can go on. And, maybe as you do more blacksmithing, you can maybe add in some blacksmithing like repeatable quests or something like that, even if it just fills up a bar or something, and, eventually you can get some cool rewards for being a blacksmith, being deeply invested in blacksmithing and, doing things for the blacksmiths. And they do that enough. And then blacksmithing's like, oh, that's a thing. I kept up my blacksmithing and I have this cool mount that only a master blacksmith can get. Now I can show off that I'm a master blacksmith. But then it's like mounts. Okay, well, maybe is there a way to revamp mounts to make those more interesting? What can we do to like expand the ways in which we can actually reward a player? Yeah, somebody said that's actually just order halls for crafters. I need it. Yeah, do that. But then just don't do order halls. Like order halls plus. Push it forward, right? Last time being like conduits, soulbinds, random customization that's annoying that people just sim through. Less time making that shite. More time making cool, fantastical things. It's like if you look at Legion, people got cool legendary powers that were fun to play around with. The acquisition did their head in. The reason why people went to Legion was like, oh, the player fantasy's really strong. Look at this cool big guild hall.
Exceedingly strong.
And it's like they've seemingly thought that Legion was a humongous success based on its mechanics.
Yeah.
Now, loads of us who were there in Legion beta, I mean, me and Preach were saying very similar things throughout that Legion beta of like, oh, this legendary acquisition's a bit shit. Why have you done it like that? And it turns out, Legion was fun once they kind of pulled the ripcord on a few things and kind of accelerated it a bit, and they removed those initial pain points. But I think the real reason why Legion did so well was the time and effort was put into cool, fantastical shit.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. Yeah. So how do we make cool, fantastical shit for the professions? I mean, races. Here's a good example. I'm playing Guild Wars 2 a little bit right now, right? And there's just races. Just do a race. Hop in your raptor mount, do a race. Some people do the same races on the Land Beetle, which is basically like a pod racer from Star Wars. And it's it's super fast in a straight line, but it's like quite hard to control. I was doing the Lunar New Year event, and there's a little race in that. You go do the race. That's okay. Well, how about WoW just decide to do mount racing, make it a thing? Like more things, more fantasy around them. And then even for mounts, like, I don't think that we can just suddenly go and do Guild Wars mounts. Like, no, seriously, that's not gonna work. They're the best. Wouldn't work in WoW right now, but it's the best mounts in a game ever, period. Underscore, highlighted, printed, framed, put in the wall. Best. Because, like, when I'm riding around my Raptor, it feels like a fucking Raptor. It has a turning circle. It has weight. It actually, the fantasy of going through the world is reflected by the feel of using the Raptor, and that is inherently fun. It's not fun at I'm ping-ponging through a bunch of systems. It is fun at the level of the toy. And, like, one of the things when it comes to, fundamentals of game development is prototype the bit of your game that's the toy first. Find the fun, like the very root nugget of the thing, and then you can worry about your systems and stuff. But you have to have the toy. You have to have the fucking childlike joy in the middle of it. So we can't really do that with the mounts. But mount equipment pissed me off because it was such a wasted opportunity. It was so defensive. Mount equipment seems to have been made because Blizzard didn't like people being forced into using water striders.
That's literally the only reason it exists, yeah.
What about a mount equipment? Okay, how about instead you just divide up mounts into families? You've got horses. Maybe horses have this extra ability or extra thing they do, something unique to a horse. Maybe griffins and hippogriffs do this. Maybe dragon mounts do this. And then suddenly there's a little point of gameplay differentiation between the mounts. Yeah. And then, with the mount equipment, how about we think of other forms of mount equipment that we can get that rather being defensive, they feel, and I say offensive here, I mean it's like, hey player, we made a thing, fucking have fun. Instead of, hey player, we identified that you don't always want to use your water strider, but you do use your water strider because of its mechanical benefits. Therefore, we've implemented the mount equipment system, and then, now your horse can be like a water strider. That's not fun. That's solving a problem. It's not creating a fun fantasy. So why don't they do that and just tie it all into the... friggin' professions and stuff. And, suddenly, if, let's just say in the professions, you've got your profession order hall thingy with, its own little content track going on, and then the professions get to do more things because, suddenly player housing exists, or mounts have got a whole bunch more to them. Oh, this is now us making an MMO instead of Destiny 2.
Instead of esports.
Yeah, instead of tab targeting esport Destiny.
Yeah.
Which, So that's what I'm saying. It's like, how do we push it forward, make it more exciting? It's just that thing. You actually brought it up first about like how these endgame zones, it's like they're constantly just trying to iterate themselves back to people enjoying an endgame zone like the Timeless Isles.
Yeah.
Well, where's the next Timeless Isles? Because the next Timeless Isles isn't the Timeless Isles, but better. It is new and different and exciting because we've already had the Timeless Isles.
Yeah, because the World of Warcraft team has not innovated on a broad scale in years.
Not since Legion.
They've been innovating very slightly. They've been iterating on systems. And obviously you look at, because I'm sure they would be handy to argue, okay, well, the soulbinds and conduits are a combination of player choice, class, combat, spec customization combined with what feels a little bit like, we designed them to feel like the old school talent trees with individual points, but instead of like 1% crit, they're a little bit more interesting. You play around with them, like with the paralytic poisons from Nia, so you get damage when you interrupt. Is that not a cool player thing you do? I'm like, well, yeah, but where's the fun things to do? Where's the novel things to do? The things that are actually like inherently enjoyable because they're made to be enjoyable. But it's always just been iterating on systems as opposed to making new content. Because that's the point where I'm wondering, that profession's system, would they be comfortable enough to try to make anything like that without being too afraid to make it stand on its own 2 feet? Or would they go, we cannot guarantee people will play this, so we have to force people into it? And I feel like that's the whole thing where if all of their broadening has to be tied back to the end game at the end of the day for them to be comfortable to release it or to put the time into it, because it might even be a case of their proposals for content or their proposals for systems are just too biased towards keeping the end game simple or simpler. So I kind of wonder, is any of this stuff possible given their fear of endgame?
Well, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Like the less you... Again, it's what people keep on saying. I think it has been such a good conversation because people are now feeling it as they wander off to other MMOs that don't do what WoW does.
Yep.
And I think people are beginning to understand that horizontal progression is really good and fun because it's an MMORPG. It's a virtual world to spend time in.
Yeah.
It's not just queuing up Mythic Plus all the time and trying to get a higher rating. It is for some people, and that's okay. That's the strength of an MMO. Multiple game experiences can reside within it. It's also why MMOs are really fucking expensive to make.
I mean,
if you're committed to making an MMO, make an MMO. Because if they were to just double down on WoW as raids, dungeons, and PvP, honestly, there's so much of what they develop right now they should honestly just stop and just put all of their resources into those things if that's truly the game that they're interested in making.
Yep.
But I don't think they should make that game. I think that they should broaden the game out. And I guess, when I just think about professions, it's like, where could it go? How far could we push it?
It could go very far. They could push it there's so much inspiration across the entire genre. Like you look at, here's going to be an example that people who have watched recent Preach content will understand. Baja in FF14 is such a wild zone where, if you're a raider, you don't have to vaguely consider it. There was maybe a point in time you wanted to grind out the relic weapon for a super tiny bonus, but generally speaking, it has its own gear set. It has its own entire storyline, but you never have to go near it if you don't want to. In fact, it's very possible to not even know it exists because the game's terrible at pointing you to content.
You have to unlock Evilise first.
Yeah, well, that's not even the point. It's more the fact that, it's squirreled off in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of difficult to find.
Well, see, I noticed the thing, though, because it's unlocked, the breadcrumb quest is from the same NPC that does Evilise.
Yeah.
So I think there's loads of people, they're trying to work out how to go to Baja, and a guide points them to that NPC. They go to the NPC, it's a different quest, and they're like, oh no, where do I go? Blue quests.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's just off at its own right.
Yeah.
And it's got its own chain of rewards that are really kind of prestigious enough. Not massively prestigious, it is just a big grind of time, genuinely. It has its own really fun content to do that you'll do for its own sake. And obviously you go in to get rewarded, you go in for your Law's Order set at the end of the day or your relic weapon. But it's like, there's a version of that where instead of doing a bunch of combat, you're crafting a load of stuff. And you make it so... Because one of the things that's important about content isn't very often about what you're doing. It's about the context of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you design, imagine saying a Corthy is not a good example, or a Maw, but imagine a Timeless Isles, but instead of there's a load of enemies, there's a load of people you have to help. And you go to one and you have to craft them a load of armor. So you have to go and pick things up from around the area. And this is, you know what it actually is? The world quests. The world quests that are the profession world quests at the minute.
Oh, yeah.
Where it is pick us up, craft this custom piece. Imagine doing that, but it's a daily quest instead of a world quest, and it's for a set of people. Imagine, say, I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, there's a bunch of Jinyu on an island, and they're going very hungry because the fish are... It's World of Warcraft, the fish are corrupted, but they're corrupted in a way that is destroying all their tools.
So you have to redeem the fish?
No. So all of the tools aren't working anymore.
Yeah.
None of their fishing baits working anymore. They're going hungry. So you have to help them through a series of daily quests and maybe a reputation. You have to recraft their tools to defeat these fish, figure out why the fish are corrupted. Maybe you have to fish up a very big corrupted fish. Something like that, but you're working through professions to help them out. And that provides the context that isn't in there in the world quests, but you use the same gameplay of the world quests. Obviously, they're literally click this thing and then craft it right there. But imagine, go pick up 5 of these, 5 of these, 5 of these, go across the zone. Maybe you do a little bit of jumping to get up high to get something. And then you go back, go to use a specific thing in like the town that they're in and craft this bit of, craft 15 fishing spears, but they'll need another 15 tomorrow because the elements in the water keep changing. And then through daily quests, the rep builds up and you eventually solve that problem. You do that. It takes like 3 weeks of gameplay or 4 weeks of gameplay of doing dailies, but the dailies are different and there's context there. So you're actually having, you feel like you're actually helping these people. And I think that's what'll separate it from being the world quest, even though it's the same stuff of, this isn't really a bunch of gameplay, but it's interesting, it's fun to do.
The thing that matters is the player fantasy you're trying to craft.
Oh, yeah.
Like ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, this is, for fuck's sake. Yes, I'm basically talking about the crafting beast tribes in FF14. I haven't done any of the crafting beast tribes yet. I've only been doing the combat related ones. But yeah, that's... yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
just provide context and some content.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just like, what are the little unique nuggets of fantasy? Because, in Korthia, getting mounts didn't feel like doing a thing. Oh, yeah, it felt like just killing a bunch of jackboxes each day. Yeah. Whereas in Argent Tournament, and I know there's definitely criticisms of the tournament, but in the Argent Tournament, it's like, oh, I have a fantasy here. It's not just like, what's the whole fantasy of Shadowlands? It's, I am the Maw Walker, and I must defeat the Jailer Zoval, the Betrayer, and recraft the sigils, and all of these very exciting things. But like, that's all Korthia ever was, right? Whereas, Argent Tournament, yeah, okay, there's the Lich King stuff, but it's a cool tournament, and we're doing the thing to get the stuff, and that's how we get them out. Yeah. Like, it's tied up in a fantasy. Or even, to talk good about the next patch that's coming out in a few days, the Protoform Synthesis. Yeah. At least it's got like a little fantasy behind it. So, yeah, that's that, I suppose. More interesting, fantastical context to do the mechanics that already exist, and then more ways to broaden out the ways in which players can be rewarded in the game. And actually all of that would massively help professions by default, probably, because they could naturally slot in. And also profession order halls, let's do them, because I think that'd be cool. All right.
Yep.
So,
man, that was great.
Yeah, that was good.
I really have to communicate how, generally speaking, I don't, whenever I think, not a lot of it is visual. I very, very much in terms of concepts and words and stuff. But as I was explaining that idea of helping the Jinyu out fishing, I literally formed like the entire island is clearly in my head. The quests that you do are clearly in my head. Even some of the dialogue and how they're talking about it is very clearly in my head. So, man, this is the problem of theorizing what World of Warcraft could do. You get excited for something that probably won't happen.